My name is Julia, and I'm 30 years old. It was Christmas Eve, the one night every year when my entire family gathered around the same table, pretending that everything was perfect. The living room glowed with warm golden lights, the soft hum of holiday music filled the air, and the smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon candles drifted through every corner of the house. It looked like a picture, perfect evening. But sometimes, the prettiest nights hide the deepest cracks. I sat at the far end of the table, where I always seemed to end up. My father, in his usual neat sweater and proud posture, sat at the head. My sister Emily sat beside him, scrolling through her phone with one hand and sipping red wine with the other. Across from her was my brother, Michael, talking about his new job promotion, his voice loud and confident. My stepmother, Patricia, was fussing over the dishes, making sure everyone's plate was full. Everyone had something to talk about, except me. I smiled when they looked at me, nodding politely. But inside, I felt like a ghost. It wasn't always this way. There was a time when I used to love Christmas, decorating the tree with my mom, baking cookies, laughing so hard that flour covered our faces. But since she passed away, the holiday never felt the same. Her chair at the table was empty, but her absence filled the entire room. And even though no one said it out loud, we all felt it. Still, what hurt most wasn't her absence. It was the way the rest of the family had learned to move on without her, while I was still trying to find my footing. Everyone seemed so successful, so sure of their lives. Emily was married, Michael just bought a new house, and Dad was still running his company like nothing ever changed. Then there was me, jobless, single, renting a small apartment I could barely afford, and trying to convince myself every morning that things would get better. The table sparkled with laughter and conversation. Emily was showing everyone pictures from her recent vacation in Greece, her husband's hand around her waist in every photo. Michael bragged about his new car, a brand he'd only dreamed of last year. Dad looked proud, his children doing well, living lives that looked beautiful from the outside. Then his eyes met mine. For a moment, I thought I saw softness there, maybe even care. But then he quickly looked away, almost disappointed. I tried to say something, anything, to join the conversation, but my voice caught in my throat. What could I even say? I'm still sending out job applications. I'm still waiting for someone to love me again. No one wanted to hear about the messy parts of life at a holiday table. They wanted smiles, success, and stories that made them feel good. I forced a small laugh when Emily teased Michael about his haircut, but my heart wasn't in it. I could feel that invisible distance between us, a wall built from unspoken comparisons. Every success they shared felt like a reminder of my failures. Every laugh reminded me how long it had been since I'd felt genuine joy. At one point, my father poured champagne into everyone's glass. The golden bubbles sparkled under the lights, and I stared at them, thinking how fragile they looked. Bright for a second, then gone. That's how I felt, temporary, fading, easily overlooked. When he lifted his glass for a toast, everyone leaned in. To family, he said, his voice strong and certain. Everyone raised their glasses and echoed, to family. I did too, though my voice barely rose above a whisper. I looked around at the people who shared my blood, but not my world, and I realized something that stung more than any insult. I wasn't really part of their joy anymore. I was the quiet space between their laughter. That night, as the snow fell softly outside, I felt the coldness inside my chest match the winter air. Surrounded by warmth, lights, and love, I had never felt more alone. And yet, something inside me whispered that this loneliness, this silent ache, was the beginning of a truth I hadn't yet understood. The laughter at the table carried on as though the world had no cracks, as though no one in that room had ever tasted failure. I sat there with a polite smile fixed on my face, pretending that I didn't feel like an outsider in my own family. My father, always the man of pride and precision, poured himself another glass of wine. His voice filled the room, steady, deep, and heavy with authority. To family, he said again, raising his glass higher this time. Everyone clinked glasses, the crystal sound bright and sharp. Then, with that same half-smirk he wore whenever he was about to make a joke at someone's expense, he added, "And to the one who still cannot get their life together." There was a brief pause. It was as if the air had frozen mid-laugh. Then Emily, my sister, leaned back in her chair with a smug grin.
"Oh, come on, Dad,"
she said, her voice sugary but cruel. "Don't be so harsh. At least he, or should I say she, makes us feel financially better about ourselves." The room erupted in laughter. Even my stepmother chuckled softly, covering her mouth with her hand, as though that made it less hurtful. My smile didn't move. It just stayed there, frozen in place. My fingers tightened around the stem of my glass, the coolness of it grounding me in that unbearable moment. I felt the laughter echoing around me, bouncing off the walls like little knives, and each one cut a bit deeper. I could feel my face getting hot, my throat tightening, my eyes burning, not from anger, but from humiliation. It wasn't the first time they'd made a joke like that. It had become a pattern. Small remarks that reminded me of my failures, dressed up as family humor. My father called it tough love. My sister called it banter. But to me, it was a reminder that no matter what I did, I was never enough. Every word, every smirk chipped away at whatever little confidence I still had left. I looked around the table. Emily was laughing with her husband, showing him a wink, as if to say she'd scored another perfect line. Michael didn't say anything, but he didn't stop her either. He just looked away, busying himself with carving the turkey. And my father, he looked satisfied, as if his joke had served its purpose. Maybe he thought it would motivate me. Maybe he thought I'd laugh too. But he didn't see how it hollowed me out from the inside. I took a slow sip of my drink, just to keep from crying. The liquid burned down my throat, sharp and bitter, but at least it distracted me from the ache in my chest. I could have said something right then. I could have snapped back, reminded them of the times I'd been there for them, or the struggles I'd faced that they didn't even know about. But the truth was, I was too tired to defend myself, too tired to explain that surviving each day was, in itself, an achievement. Instead, I looked down at my glass and whispered under my breath, "To the disappointment who still dares to show up." The laughter stopped. Emily froze, her grin faltering. My father's face stiffened, and the only sound left in the room was the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. For a long, suffocating moment, no one said a word. It was as though my quiet words had reached into the middle of that perfect family picture and torn a hole straight through it. I met my father's eyes. He looked unsure, maybe guilty, maybe confused, but still too proud to say anything. Emily opened her mouth, then shut it again. The silence stretched, and suddenly the warmth of the room felt like fire pressing against my skin. I wanted to leave, to escape before the tears broke through the fragile wall I'd built around myself. But I didn't move. I just sat there, holding my glass, my heart pounding like it wanted to escape too. I realized in that moment how small I'd allowed myself to become in this family, shrinking every time they made me the punchline, staying quiet so they wouldn't see how much it hurt. After what felt like forever, my father cleared his throat and said, almost too casually, "It was just a joke, Julia. Don't take it so seriously." I nodded slowly, forcing a small smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Of course," I said softly, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "Just a joke." But something changed in me that night. Maybe it was the way the words tasted like ashes when I spoke them, or maybe it was the sudden clarity that I didn't belong to this version of family anymore. The one that measured love by success and worth by money, As the conversation slowly picked up again, I sat in silence, realizing that sometimes it's not strangers who break your heart. It's the people who share your table. The quiet that followed that dinner lingered in my chest long after the night was over. I drove home in silence. The sound of the windshield wipers brushing against the glass filling the emptiness between my thoughts. Each streetlight that passed seemed to flash a memory across my mind, moments when life had once felt certain, safe, and full of direction. I wasn't always this broken version of myself. There was a time when I thought I had everything figured out. I had a good job at a marketing firm, a small apartment that I loved, and a fiancé who promised me forever. His name was Ethan. He used to tell me that I had a light in me, something warm that made people feel at home. For a while I believed him. But then the world changed in ways I never expected. It started when the company I worked for suddenly downsized. I still remember the day they handed me the white envelope, the kind that changes the rhythm of your heartbeat. My manager's face was sympathetic, his voice carefully chosen to sound kind, but all I heard was, "We have to let you go." I smiled politely, thanked him for the opportunity, and walked out of the building with my head held high. I didn't cry until I got home. That night, I sat on the kitchen floor staring at the tiles, feeling like a part of me had just disappeared. At first, I told myself it was temporary. I sent out resumes, made calls, attended interviews that went nowhere. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, the confidence I used to wear like armor began to rust away. Ethan tried to be supportive in the beginning. He would make me coffee in the mornings, remind me to stay positive, tell me that something better was coming. But as time went on, I could see the disappointment growing in his eyes. He didn't say it outright, but I could feel it every time he talked about someone else's achievements, or made plans that no longer included me. Then one evening, he came home late. He didn't sit next to me like he usually did. He just stood there, his coat still on, and said, "Julia, I think we want different things." My heart sank before he even finished the sentence. I wanted to ask him what those things were, but I already knew. He wanted a future that didn't include someone who was struggling to rebuild her life. He left a week later. I stood at the window watching him drive away, the tail lights fading like the last flicker of hope I'd been holding on to. After that, the days blurred together. I started counting time by the number of rejection emails in my inbox and the number of nights I couldn't sleep. I stopped answering friends' messages because I didn't know how to explain that I wasn't fine. My father called once, asking if I'd figured something out yet. I said I was working on it, even though I wasn't sure what even was anymore. The truth was, I felt invisible, like the world had moved on without me. And then, as if life hadn't taken enough, my mother got sick, the kind of sickness that doesn't get better with medicine or rest. I spent months by her side, watching her fade little by little. Yet she was the only one who still believed in me. "You're stronger than you think," she whispered one night, her hand trembling in mine. Life breaks us in strange ways, but it's only so we can learn how to rebuild differently. When she passed away, it felt like the last piece of my world had fallen apart. I packed away her things in silence, feeling like I was erasing parts of myself with every box I closed. After the funeral, my family went back to their lives, their jobs, their routines. I went back to nothing. So when I sat at that holiday table months later, surrounded by people who measured worth in success and numbers, I wasn't just the one who didn't have her life together. I was the one who had lost everything: love, purpose, and the only person who ever made me feel enough. That's what they didn't see when they laughed. They didn't see the story behind the silence, the battles behind the smile. They just saw failure. But somewhere deep inside, buried under all that pain, a quiet voice still whispered, "Not the end yet. The next morning after that dinner, I woke up with a heavy chest, the kind that makes breathing feel like work. My phone buzzed with messages from Emily. Funny family photos, pictures of the dinner table, everyone smiling like nothing had happened. I stared at them for a while, wondering how it was so easy for them to move on, while my heart was still replaying every cruel word, every laugh that echoed louder than it should have. I told myself to let it go, to not make a scene, to stay quiet as I always did. But deep down, something had shifted. Silence no longer felt safe. It felt like drowning. A week passed and my father called. He said, "Julia, we're all getting together again for New Year's dinner. You should come. Let's start fresh." I hesitated, but then agreed. Part of me hoped maybe this time would be different. Maybe they'd see me, really see me. I arrived early, helping Patricia set the table, just like Mom used to. For a few moments it felt almost peaceful, the soft glow of candles, the sound of the old jazz records my mother loved. It was comforting, like the house remembered her. But as everyone started to arrive, the noise came back. The same laughter, the same stories, the same invisible wall between me and them. Dinner began, and I tried to keep my smile steady, answering polite questions about what I'd been up to. Each one stung in its own way. My sister went on about her new business venture, my brother about his plans to travel to Europe. My father nodded proudly at them, occasionally glancing at me with that same disappointed look, the one that said, "You could have been more." Then, like a repeat of the last gathering, it happened again. My father lifted his glass and said, "To progress. To those who keep moving forward in life." He looked right at me when he said it, his tone calm but heavy with meaning. Emily laughed, nudging me playfully. "Don't worry, Jules. Your time will come. Maybe next year will be your year." Her husband snorted into his drink, and I heard Michael's half-hearted chuckle follow. I could feel my pulse in my ears. My fingers trembled slightly, gripping the edge of the tablecloth. My heart screamed, "Say something. Please. Say something this time." And before I even knew it, I did. I set my glass down gently, the sound of it touching the wood sharper than I expected. The table went quiet. "You know what?" I said softly. "You're right. I don't have everything figured out. I don't have a fancy job or a house or a partner who posts perfect pictures with me. But I've been trying, every single day, to get back up." They all stared at me. My father frowned, ready to interrupt, but I didn't let him. The words had been locked inside me for too long. You think success is about who earns the most or smiles the widest at dinner. But you never ask what it takes to keep going when everything falls apart. You never ask what it costs to survive losing everything and still show up at this table, pretending you're fine so no one feels uncomfortable. Emily shifted in her seat, eyes darting away. My father looked at me with a mix of surprise and something I couldn't name, maybe guilt. Patricia's hands froze on her napkin. The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time, it was freeing. "I've spent so long trying to be the version of me you'd be proud of." I continued, my voice breaking slightly. "But I'm done apologizing for where I am. I'm still standing. That has to count for something." No one said a word. For once, there were no jokes, no comments. Just quiet, the kind that demanded reflection. I took a deep breath, feeling my heartbeat slow, the weight lifting from my chest. "So here's my toast," I said, raising my glass again. "To the ones who are still trying, even when it feels impossible. To the ones who haven't given up." I took a sip, and for the first time, it didn't burn. I stood up, my legs shaking slightly, and pushed my chair back. "I think that's enough family time for me tonight," I said gently, smiling, not out of anger, but peace. I didn't need their approval anymore. As I walked out, I caught my father's eyes one last time. He didn't speak, but I saw something shift in them, a flicker of realization, maybe even respect. And in that silence, I understood something powerful sometimes. Standing up for yourself isn't about fighting. It's about finally choosing yourself, even when no one else does. Outside, the night air was cold, but it felt clean, like the world was brand new. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like running from my life. I felt like walking straight into it. The silence after my words felt endless. It hung in the air like a heavy curtain, pressing against the walls and against my chest. For years I had swallowed that silence, let it sit inside me until it became part of who I was. Quiet, compliant, invisible. But that night, something inside me refused to stay quiet any longer. I could no longer sit at that table and pretend I was okay while they mocked the cracks in my life. Every broken piece of me wanted to speak, to be seen, to finally say the words I had been choking on for years. I looked at my father first. His expression was still, but his eyes carried that same disappointed weight that had followed me my whole life. He didn't need to say anything. I had memorized that look since childhood. It was the one that said, "You could have done better." I'd seen it when I came home with average grades, when I chose art over accounting, when I fell apart after losing my job, and especially when I couldn't seem to fix my life fast enough. "Dade," I said softly, setting my glass down. "Do you know what it feels like to be the family's joke? To sit here and listen to everyone laugh about how I'm the one who can't get it together." My voice trembled, but I didn't stop. "You call it humor, but it's not. It's cruel. It's years of reminders that I'm not enough for you." Emily shifted in her chair. "Julia, come on. It was just a joke." I turned to her. "A joke you've been making since I lost my job, Emily. Every year it's the same thing. You don't even ask how I'm doing. You just assume I've failed again." Her face flushed. "That's not fair." "No," I said quietly. "What's not fair is sitting here, pretending that I'm not breaking inside, while everyone treats my pain like entertainment." My father sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Julia, you're too sensitive. We're family. We tease each other. Don't turn this into something it's not." And that was it. The line he always used to shut me down, to make me feel small for caring. I felt something hot and fierce rise in my chest. "You think I'm being sensitive. Maybe I am. But do you know what sensitivity really means, Dad? It means I still care. It means your words still matter to me, even when I wish they didn't." He blinked, his mouth slightly open but no words coming out. The table was silent again. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the wall and the hum of the heater. My heart pounded so loudly that it drowned everything else out. "I know you're proud of Emily and Michael," I continued, my voice calmer now. "They've built good lives. They've achieved things. But not everyone's journey looks the same. I didn't choose to lose my job. I didn't choose to watch my fiancé walk away. And I didn't choose to lose Mom. Life happened, and I'm still standing. Isn't that something?" For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of softness in my father's eyes. Then he looked down, unable to meet my gaze. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat burning. "You only celebrate achievements, Dad. You never celebrate effort. You never notice the strength it takes just to show up. But I'm done apologizing for surviving." No one spoke. My sister stared at her plate. Her husband cleared his throat awkwardly, and Michael looked between us, unsure whether to say something or stay silent. The quiet was thick, uncomfortable, but beneath it I felt something new, a strange, trembling sense of freedom. I stood slowly, my chair scraping softly against the floor. My hands shook, but I didn't hide them. "I'm not angry," I said quietly. "I'm just tired. Tired of trying to earn love that should have been given freely." My father finally looked up. His eyes glistened, though he tried to mask it with a stern expression. "Julia," he started, but his voice faltered. I gave him a small, tired smile. "It's okay, Dad. You don't have to say anything. I just needed to say this, for me. I picked up my coat, the warmth of the room already fading as I walked toward the door. Every step felt heavy, but also lighter than any I had taken before. When I reached the doorway, I turned back for a second. My family sat frozen, no laughter, no judgment, just silence, the kind that finally made room for truth. I whispered, "I love you all, but I need to love myself too." Then I stepped out into the cold night. The air was sharp, biting, real. Snowflakes landed softly on my skin, melting into tiny drops that felt like freedom. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt strong. Broken maybe, but strong enough to start again. The air outside was cold, and the street was quiet except for the crunch of snow beneath my boots. The night sky stretched endlessly above me, a deep navy scattered with distant stars. I stood there for a long time, letting the cold bite into my skin, trying to calm the storm inside me. My hands trembled, not from the weather, but from everything I had finally let out. My father's words, my sister's laughter, years of being silent, it had all poured out of me at once. It was terrifying, but also freeing. For the first time I had spoken my truth, and even though it left me shaken, I felt lighter. Still, the moment I stepped into my car, a wave of sadness washed over me. It wasn't anger anymore, it was grief. Grief for the years I had lost trying to be enough, and grief for the people who never noticed how hard I had been trying. I drove with no destination in mind. The city was quiet, the streets shimmering under soft yellow lights. Every corner I turned seemed to lead me back into memories, moments with my mother that I had tried so hard to bury, thinking it would make the pain fade. But that night, those memories came alive again, uninvited but comforting. I remembered being a child, sitting on the kitchen counter as she cooked, humming her favorite song. She used to say that the world would try to measure me by what I achieved, but that I should always remember who I was when everything else fell apart. "You don't need to be perfect, Julia," she used to whisper when I cried over mistakes. "You just need to be kind and brave enough to start again." I could almost hear her voice in that moment, soft but certain, like she was sitting beside me in the car. I pulled over near the park she used to take me to. The snow-covered benches looked untouched, peaceful. I turned off the engine and sat there, staring at the faint glow of the streetlights. For years, I had carried her words without really understanding them. I thought strength meant never breaking, never crying, never admitting I was lost. But now I saw it differently. Real strength was what I had done tonight, standing up, speaking my truth, even if my voice shook. It was leaving that table without hate in my heart, choosing peace instead of silence. My mother would have been proud of that. She would have smiled and said, "See, you found your courage after all." The wind rattled softly against the window, and I closed my eyes, letting the memories play like in an old film. I saw her sitting by her hospital bed, pale but smiling, her hand gripping mine tightly. "You have to promise me something," she had said in a whisper. "Promise me you won't give up on yourself. Life will break you, Julia. It breaks everyone. But you have to rebuild yourself softer, not harder." At the time, I didn't understand what she meant. I thought softness meant weakness. But now, sitting in the quiet night, I finally understood. Being soft didn't mean being fragile. It meant being open, to pain, to love, to change. It meant allowing yourself to feel, to fall, to heal slowly. My mother lived that way until her last breath, and I wanted to live like that too. Tears rolled down my cheeks, but they didn't feel heavy this time. They felt cleansing, like the release I had needed for years. I whispered into the silence, "Mom, I wish you were here. I wish you could see that I'm trying." For a moment, I could almost feel her presence. A warmth that wasn't physical but familiar, wrapping around me like a quiet reassurance. When I finally started the car again, I didn't feel lost. I didn't know what the future held. I still had no job, no clear plan, but for the first time, that didn't scare me. I knew I would find my way, one small step at a time. My mother's words echoed softly in my mind. You're stronger than you think. As I drove home, I looked up at the stars again. They looked like tiny pieces of hope scattered across the sky, far away, but still shining. I smiled through my tears, whispering a thank you to her, to the night, to the version of me that hadn't given up. Maybe healing wasn't about fixing everything. Maybe it was about learning to breathe again, after you've been silent for too long. When I reached home, I turned off the lights, sat on my bed, and took a deep breath. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a failure. I felt human, fragile, imperfect, but still standing. And that was enough. The new year came quietly. No fireworks, no parties, no resolutions scribbled on paper. Just me, sitting by the window of my small apartment, watching the snow melt slowly from the rooftops. The days that followed the confrontation with my family felt strange, empty, yet lighter somehow. It was as though a weight had been lifted from my chest, leaving behind both space and silence. I didn't know what to fill it with yet, but I knew I couldn't go back to who I was before. The old Julia, the one who waited for approval, who lived for validation, who measured her worth by other people's smiles. She had walked out that door the same night I left my father's house. At first, the change was quiet, almost invisible. I started with mornings. Instead of waking up and immediately scrolling through my phone, I began making coffee and sitting in silence, watching the sunrise filter through my window. There was something healing in that stillness. It reminded me of my mother, how she used to start every morning humming to herself, no matter how tired she was. I decided to keep a notebook by the table and write one small thing I was grateful for each day. Some mornings it was simple things. The smell of rain, the sound of birds, the strength to get out of bed. Others were harder, but I wrote them anyway. Slowly, I began to see that gratitude wasn't about having everything. It was about noticing the small pieces that still made life beautiful. Finding work wasn't easy. My confidence was still fragile, and every rejection felt like reopening an old wound. But one day, while walking past a small community center, I saw a sign that read, "Volunteers needed, help women rebuild their lives." I don't know what drew me in, but something inside me said, "Try." The first day I walked into that center, I was terrified. I felt like an imposter, someone who had nothing to offer. But then I met the women there, some younger, some older, each carrying their own quiet pain. There were single mothers looking for jobs, survivors of broken homes, women who had been told, just like me, that they weren't enough. I started small, helping with resumes and letters, making coffee, listening to stories. But those stories changed me. They reminded me that struggle didn't mean failure. It meant humanity. Every time I saw a woman smile because someone finally listened to her, I felt something inside me heal. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel useless. I felt needed. Around the same time, I started painting again. My mother had always encouraged it, but after she passed, I couldn't bring myself to pick up a brush. One afternoon, I unpacked the old box of paints from my closet. The smell of acrylic hit me like a wave of memory. I painted without thinking, colors flowing together in messy, imperfect strokes. It wasn't about creating something beautiful. It was about releasing what I had held inside for too long. Days turned into weeks, and my apartment slowly filled with canvases, splashes of color, fragments of emotion, pieces of healing. One evening, I took a deep breath and decided to post one of my paintings online. I didn't expect anything, but a few days later, someone messaged me asking if it was for sale. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying yes. When I mailed that first painting, I cried, not because of the money, but because it felt like a piece of my pain had finally found a purpose. Life didn't suddenly become easy. There were still lonely nights, still moments when I missed my mother or felt the sting of my family's words. But there was also something new, hope. A quiet, steady kind of hope that didn't depend on anyone else. I started to understand that healing wasn't a destination, it was a daily choice. Sometimes, on my way home from the community center, I would stop by the same park where I had sat months ago after that painful dinner. The snow had melted, and the trees were beginning to bloom again. I'd sit on the bench and whisper to the sky, "I'm doing it, Mom. I'm really doing it." And somewhere deep in my heart, I could almost hear her voice, soft and proud, "I know, Julia. I know." That was the moment I realized I didn't need to have my life perfectly together. I just needed to keep walking, one brave, imperfect step at a time. A year later, the holidays returned. The streets were alive again, golden lights strung across windows, children's laughter echoing through the air, the faint smell of cinnamon and pine drifting from every cafe. I walked slowly toward my family's house, my breath visible in the cold air, my heart surprisingly calm. Last Christmas had broken me. This year, I wasn't coming to prove anything or to hide behind polite smiles. I was coming simply as myself. No apologies, no pretending. When I stepped inside, the warmth of the house wrapped around me like a blanket. The same table was there, the same chairs, the same sounds of clinking dishes and laughter. But something felt different. Maybe it was me. My father looked up first, surprise flickering in his eyes, followed by a hesitant smile. My sister waved awkwardly, her tone softer than I remembered. "Hey," she said. I smiled back. Hey. The simple word carried 1,000 untold stories. Dinner began as it always did, filled with chatter and jokes. For a while I listened quietly, feeling the familiar rhythm of my family's voices. Yet beneath the laughter, I could sense an unspoken tension, remnants of the year before. I decided not to let it define this evening. I wasn't here to reopen wounds. I was here to show, through presence alone, that I had healed. Halfway through dinner, my father raised his glass. "To family," he said, his voice carrying a rare tenderness. Then he turned to me. "And to Julia for coming back." I looked at him, the man whose words had once pierced my heart like knives. For a second, memories flashed through me, the sting, the shame, the quiet tears after that night. But now, instead of pain, there was understanding. I smiled gently and lifted my glass. "To the ones still figuring life out," I said, my voice calm but strong. "May we never stop trying." The table fell silent for a moment. My father's expression softened. My sister blinked quickly, her eyes glistening. No one said anything, but something shifted in that silence. It wasn't forgiveness asked or given. It was simply recognition. They could see it now. I wasn't the failure they once joked about. I was someone who had walked through fire and found her own light. After dinner, my sister joined me in the kitchen as I helped clear the plates. She leaned against the counter and said quietly, "I never realized how hard it must have been for you last year." "I'm sorry." I looked at her, surprised, then nodded. "Thank you," I said softly. We were all learning. It was the truth. We had all grown, each in our own way. She asked about my paintings, and when I told her about the small online store I'd started, she smiled. Mom would have been proud. Her words landed gently, filling me with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. Later, when I stepped outside, the night was cold but peaceful. The stars shone like tiny promises, and I felt a quiet sense of completion. My life wasn't perfect. I didn't have everything figured out. But I had something far greater, a sense of peace with who I was becoming. I had stopped running from my pain and started walking beside it, learning from it. I realized that life isn't about comparing chapters or measuring success by timelines. It's about finding meaning in your own journey, no matter how messy or slow it feels. For years I had thought I was behind everyone else, but now I understood. There's no such thing as being late in life. Healing takes its own time, and so does becoming who you are meant to be. As I walked to my car, snow began to fall softly, tiny white flakes resting on my coat. I looked up and smiled. For the first time in a long while. I wasn't wishing for anything different. I was grateful for the pain that taught me empathy, for the silence that taught me strength, for the mistakes that led me back to myself. I whispered into the cold night, "I'm okay now, Mom." And deep within me, I felt her presence again, quiet and proud. The world around me was still uncertain, still unpredictable, but my heart was steady. I had learned that true success isn't found in achievements, wealth, or recognition. It's found in peace. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the faint glow of the house fading behind me. It didn't hurt this time. It just felt like closing a chapter I had finally made peace with. My journey wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving to myself that I could fall apart and still rebuild with love. That night, as the snow continued to fall and the world felt calm, I finally understood the moral of my story. You don't need to have your life perfectly together to be worthy of love and respect. You just need the courage to keep showing up, one honest day at a time. True success is not defined by wealth, status, or perfection, but by the courage to rise after every fall, the strength to remain kind in the face of pain, and the grace to keep moving forward when life feels uncertain. Healing and growth are not measured by how fast we reach our goals, but by how deeply we learn to love, forgive, and believe in ourselves along the way.